name is Abbas Akhavan. I am currently in Copenhagen, where I am exhibiting at Nye Carlsberg Glyptotec and Copenhagen Contemporary. The exhibitions are a collaboration between the two institutions under the umbrella title of Curtain Call. So the show at Glyptotec is called Cast for a Folly. It's based on a photograph by Corinne Wegener of the lobby of the museum in Iraq after it had been bombed. And it was not the ruinous images that we imagine of archives or museum buildings that hold precious goods. It was the lobby of it. And I liked the image as a way because the lobby is a threshold to get into the museum, but also it's a place of hospitality more than the rest of the museum because you can hang out there. And in this image, there's a slight sense of disarray. There's not so much destruction as it is a sense of disorder, which is more, in a weird way, uncanny than seeing, smashed vitrines. That's kind of what started thinking about how images can become sculptures, or how a one-point perspective image can be turned into a space that one can walk into. So Cast for a Folly at Glyptotec, when you come in, it kind of feels somewhere between like a furniture store that's gone out of business and also maybe an installation that's not complete. So when you enter the room, you see some large sculptures, furniture, bricks, and other objects that are kind of slightly out of place. There's a sense of disorder. In the middle of the room is a large central basalt ancient lion sculpture. I decided to make that work out of cob. And I realized that in the background, the point of entry into the museum lobby, the point of break-in, had a velvet curtain. And as I was creating an alternative or an expanded space into the photograph, the entrances felt like another extension out of the photograph that we were not witness to. So I thought that could be a suggested space. So the image of the velvet curtain I replaced with a green screen. And when the lion, which is made out of cob, as I was saying, sits in front of that green screen, something started to kind of feel vibrant. And what I appreciated about that vicinity of the chroma key green and the cob was about the relationship to materials and making. So cob is essentially the most ancient way of making form. It's analogous to roots that kind of bind soil. So here we use straw, subsoil, and clay, and water, and it's just held together with moisture and compression. And then in relation to this most ancient way of making form, green screen seems like a more ubiquitous means of making form through a digital rendering or a digital space or a projected digital space. So when they sat in relation to one another, they felt like they were sitting on the opposite spectrums of that material relationship of how do you make form. One extremely flat, suggested, digital, the other ancient, very material. I guess it always starts with materials, They become a kind of a conduit to carry some sort of a content that wants to be passed on. And right after the installation, when you look back, basically you're seeing false walls of a theater propped with braces and sandbags to hold up walls. And when you exit that, you enter the Glyptotec historical museums again. And then right after, you see very historical old marble sculptures. So essentially, we've shimmed a museum inside another one. At Copenhagen Contemporary, the work Variations on a Folly, when you come in the middle of the room, there's a very large chroma key green thick wall. On top of it are 19 columns made out of cob. And it seemed like this sister exhibition or the same narrative as the initial photograph that I found by Corinne Wegener. So I arrived at this image of the Palmyra Arch being revealed in Trafalgar Square in London, UK. This colonnade is not photographed in Trafalgar Square. This colonnade would sit behind the Palmyra Arch. And what was happening in that photograph, there was a literal flattening of the Palmyra Arch as a recreation, essentially as a folly, made out of Egyptian marble at a scale that was significantly smaller than the original. And he kind of was revealed with this kind of a strange white cloth, this kind of like traditional how monuments are revealed. So it felt like a kind of a ghostly activity almost. And then under it is an arch, which is also another portal. So I've been looking at follies for the last while. I mean, obviously from a place of curiosity, because they don't make a lot of sense. But I thought after a while that actually might be their asset. Follies tend not to have a lot of authorship around them. They're not necessarily functional. They come from even the word folly is like foolishness. So I thought if there's a flattening of something so materially rich and rendered so topically, and something that carries so much time in it, into this like very, very two-dimensional photo opportunistic image, then how can I potentially expand that flatness, like give the backdrop to the photograph, create an extensive narrative that's the image in Trafalgar Square is somehow denying. So I thought, well, green screen is a way to kind of talk about that positioning of an image in a place, or us in an image that's fictitious of a place. So green screen actually became a strategy to actively deny sight. Gallery space is a construct, but I think people believe in it still, as a way that you come to witness authentic things. And I thought if we put a stage in it, then these things become more analogous to actors, and we become heightened audiences. They're made to be placeholders almost for the real things without any claim to authenticity. They're not meant to occupy serious thought. It's more about mystery and fantasy, or even nostalgia. And an actor, in a way, does that. Like, we go to cinema and we watch a person that we know has shapeshifted from one role to another and take on the narrative of something either joyful or tragic, and we will believe them enough that we will share that sense of affection or sorrow or joy and not question their authenticity towards the narrative. Like, is this your biography? Did you experience pain to make us feel pain? So in a weird way, I think these sculptures are kind of like that. Like they're follies made in the image of other follies. So the arch made in Trafalgar Square is also a folly. And so the green screen becomes a stage. These become placeholders for places or precious things, but they're faking time. They carry an ancient time, but through the materials, and they suggest another space or another place. And for me, it was really important that these things are self-conscious about their own relationship to the actual columns that I'm trying to reference. And they are monumental, but I think what I find comfort against their size is that they turn back to dust after every install. So these things are made out of small particles with the help of many generous technicians, and their monumentality comes with a degree of fragility. So they're held together by water, by moisture, yeah. So the relationship between the two shows is both material in that they both work with cob and green screen to some capacity. They're both stages, one for a film set, one for a theater. I'm interested in how these spaces, and more accurately, these images, are being pivoted in a way that is shifting the history of these places and events. So when you Google Palmyra Arch, Google takes you to Trafalgar Square. So now, collectively, the Palmyra Arch is in London. Collectively, we have this thought about it. It is already it's a kind of a digital looting, essentially. And I think with Cast for a Folly, in particular, I was thinking about how during war, the ruins that are of value are taken out of those grounds and shipped to other museums and private buyers. So that ruin is worth keeping. But I was also interested in who inherits the other ruins? So the fallen buildings, the broken sculptures that are worthless, the smashed vitrines. In a weird way, I think that theater set is to kind of bring the unwanted ruin of the aftermath of Iraq to different spaces with countries that were completely implicated and active or in denial of what was happening, to innocent people. So in living through this history, it's important for me to kind of also, from a personal point of view, to go and negotiate the atrocities that you all felt. It's kind of like negotiating with being witness. Yeah.